Good evening, and you're very welcome to Sideline Sportcast with your hosts Gary O'Keefe and me, Kevin Bolger. This evening we're looking forward to Saturday's action in the All-Ireland Championship. It's a double-header at Croke Park where Dublin will take on Laois, and in the first game, Down take on Connacht champions Mayo. Gary, the first game is looking like a very interesting fixture. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, it is a very interesting game, all right. You have two teams obviously coming off the back of victories. Mayo are the Connacht champions, but Down lost out to a very formidable Donegal team in their own championship. If you look at current form, it's hard to gauge where both of these teams are at. You saw Mayo beating Sligo in the Connacht championship, but then Sligo went on to shift a very heavy defeat, so that wouldn't really bode too well for Mayo. On the other hand, Down beat Tipperary, who wouldn't be traditionally known as a very good team. So it's gonna be difficult. These two teams, it's hard to tell what level they're at the moment.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, Gary. I mean, both teams are traditionally good football teams, but when you look at the competition they've had this year, they haven't really had to prove themselves that much, save maybe Down against Donegal in the Ulster final. As you said, Donegal are a very formidable outfit. But other than that, they haven't really had a huge test. Sligo, I mean, there's not much that Mayo can really take from the Sligo victory in the Connacht Championship, is there?
Well, yeah, the only thing was Sligo did push them to within 2 points, so that would almost be a worry more than anything else for Mayo. One thing that Mayo do have coming back into this game is Aidan O'Shea is going to start. He's just recovered from that stomach injury. I think he tore a muscle in his stomach or something. And I suppose the whole Conor Mortimer situation has blown over as well at this stage. An interesting fact about Mayo is they brought this new guy named is Alan Murphy into the squad. He's the top scorer in their championship, but I don't think he's had an inter-county debut yet. So it'll be interesting to see if he features. You'd wonder why would they bother bringing him into the squad at this late stage in the championship if they weren't going to feature.
And if any League of Ireland fans are watching, you may know his name from the Airtricity First Division, where he plays his soccer with Mervyn United.
Then Down, on the other hand, I would say they probably have better individual talent going into this match. The likes of Benny Coulter, Mark Poland and Ambrose Rogers would start on any inter-county team. And then if you look at Marty Clark and Caleb Mooney, who are gone off abroad to Australia to play Aussie rules, they would probably be up there with the best in Ireland. And they still are pretty much up there. They're coming off a victory to Tipperary. They beat Tip 113 to 11 points. I would say that Tip team is slightly underrated, so they did well to come off the 6-day turnaround, coming off on the losing end against Donegal in the Ulster final.
Yeah, and I was just reading an interesting piece in the Irish Examiner where the manager of the Down team, James McCartan, he was giving out about the 6-day turnover, and he was kind of, he was kind of saying how he can't wait to see the back of it, and because they're trying to get rid of that whole 6-day turnover because it's not a lot of time to prepare for a game, is it? And Tipperary, I agree with you. They are an underrated side. Definitely, Tipperary are starting to come into their own as a dual county sports place now. They're no longer just about hurling. Their football team is coming up in the ranks. Definitely Down have the better individual players. Mark Poland, as you said, in centre forward, and of course Benny Coulter, who's one of the top players in the country. I don't think Mayo have the same kind of advantage there. I don't think they really have any standout all-star players at the moment.
No, they mightn't have the all-star players, but one thing you can guarantee about Mayo is they will be well drilled. I like the style of play they do, where they're starting to bring up the wing backs and the corner backs, and they're trying to use them as an attacking outlet. You see Keith Higgins, they're really utilizing his speed this year. He's probably the fastest player in the championship. I can't think of any other player.
No, I haven't seen a faster player this year.
He could probably run in the Olympics.
I hear you saying both suffering from some fitness problems, so he's probably happy coming into it.
But Mayo will be well drilled. Like, we have seen that they are starting slow enough to this championship by their own standards. We all saw how good they were last season, especially against Cork. But one thing you'll guarantee is they'll be well drilled. Cian O'Neill he trained Tipperary to an All-Ireland hurling final, and they won that. And if anybody remembers Tipperary started off very slow in that season too, so they'll be peaking at the right time of the championships. They'll definitely give Down a right go for their money.
Yeah, and Cian O'Neill, he has a lot of experience with senior teams. He's coached with the Kildare team, the Tipperary team, as you said, and
the Limerick footballers as well.
Yeah, but if, as you say, Keane has done the same with Mayo as he has with Tipperary, then you can be guaranteed they will be very fit and they will be coming to their own against Down.
We've talked a lot about this match, so who do you think is actually going to win?
Yeah, I thought about this a lot, Gary, and I like the way Mayo look this year, and I think you're right about the fitness thing. I think they will come into their own later into the season, but whether it's going to be too late or not, I don't know. And I just think that Down have the better players, and they had an off day against Donegal in the Ulster Championship, and I think they'll be able to come into their own here against Mayo, and they're off the back of a good victory against Tipperary last weekend. So I think Down are going to win this one comfortably.
All right. Me, on the other hand, I have to be very cautious now who I hedge my bets with this week, because you're 2-0 up on me after last week. The same as yourself, I think Down are going to win this one. Not because I think they're that much better than Mayo, but partially because they're coming off of a recent victory, whereas Mayo have had a bit of a layover, and it's difficult to keep the intensity up when you're not playing matches. I would say Down will win this one, but they'll have to work for it. But if Mayo can play up to the same standard that they played against Cork last year in the All-Ireland quarter-final, I would fancy Mayo. But I don't think they'll be able to produce that form, so I'm gonna say Down for this one.
Okay, so Gary says he's going to go for Down, and I also say I'm going to go for Down. So I think now it's time to move on to our next game, which is the hotly anticipated Dublin Laois game. It was actually a bit of controversy about this game. Well, I don't know if you can call it controversy, but originally it was planned that the Sunday game was going to be shown on RTE, and the Dublin fans voiced, a lot of disapproval about this. They wanted the Dublin game shown live on RTE, so now it's switched around. We have RTE showing this game, and TV3 are doing the Sunday broadcast instead. But when we look at Dublin, they're obviously the All-Ireland champions. They're the current Leinster champions. They're on good form. They haven't slipped up too much. Laois, on the other hand, they just after beating Meath in the previous round, which was another shock, but Meath obviously aren't up to form this year, weren't up to scratch this year. Laois are a bit of an unknown team. I don't really know what to make of them. They have Ross Munley at half forward, and John O'Loughlin at centre back, and they're both great players. But other than that, I can't profess to know too much about the Laois team.
Yeah, they lost to Longford early on in the championship, but then we saw Longford having a nice run in the back door, and losing to Longford is no shame really. They beat Meath, but actually both teams are coming off the back of victories against Meath. Which makes it easier to kind of gauge where they're at relative to each other. I would say that Laois's defeat of Meath came after Meath just recently lost against Dublin. So would it be fair to compare like for like performances? Meath would have obviously have built themselves up a lot more for the Leinster final than for a qualifier match, and they might have expected that they would be able to beat Laois. So
a bit of an anticlimax there for Meath, possibly contributing to them getting knocked out. Also, you can see, just from Laois's perspective, they're playing a very interesting brand of football, and it's one you see a lot of teams playing these days, just kind of implementing the team foul. If you look at the foul count from the Laois Meath game on the weekend just gone, Laois had 30 fouls to Meath's 13, so they're obviously going for the kind of professional fouls, and playing that kind of game. And it'd be interesting to see how that will work out in Dublin.
Dublin will definitely have the strength and physicality to break a lot of the tackles and stuff, so they might have to foul Dublin if Dublin start running at them. One thing about Dublin and Meath match was Bernard Brogan was on fire, and if Dublin can keep him, if he can stay on fire for the rest of the championship, Dublin will be a very formidable opponent for anybody. I would fancy them to to beat Laois, and I'd fancy them to beat Laois well, even though both teams have recently beaten Meath by the same margin.
It's great to see Laois in the quarter-final up against Dublin. They couldn't have got a harder draw up against the current All-Ireland champions in the quarter-finals of the championship. But I mean, they can be happy they got this far, and they can take from their victory against Meath and say, you know what, Dublin didn't do that much better against Meath. If we can put off a good performance against Dublin on any given Saturday, as it would be, we can pull this off. The only thing is, like I said, looking at the Laois team, Ross Munley and John O'Loughlin are the two standout players. But when you look at the Dublin team, they're just full of stars. I mean, I don't know whether that's media hype. As you said, you know, the Brogan brothers, they're on fire. They're playing pretty well. You have Cluxton. I mean, the Dublin team is just full of stars, and they play at such a high intensity. You wonder if Laois will be able to withstand that for 70 minutes in Croke Park with all those dubs standing in Hill 16.
Another thing about Dublin will be the subs that they have to come off the bench. You saw when Alan Brogan came off the last day, Owen O'Gara came in to fill his place, and while he didn't play the exact same style of football, he was well able to adapt, and he had a massive game coming on, and he really asked questions of Pat Gilroy as to why he isn't starting.
Yeah, and that's the depth in the squad as well that Dublin will have up against Laois. So I mean, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the strength of the first team, the strength of the bench, and the fact that they have home advantage in Croke Park, more or less. I know it's not their official home, but it's the adopted home of the Dublin fans.
Yes, it's as good as. Laois won't fear Dublin though. They'll go into this game all guns blazing. Similar enough to the way they saw the Meath match. They came in as underdogs. They said, here, we're a good team, we have a point to prove, and they'll go out and do the exact same thing against Dublin. I don't expect them to run Dublin as close as Wexford did, simply for the fact that Dublin are getting better and better each game. They blew loud out of the water. While they had a scare against Wexford, they were the better team against Meath overall. While Meath drew close at the end, Dublin, the game was over at that stage, and Dublin were the better team. And I expect them to build on that performance, because they're aiming for the All-Ireland Championship. They're aiming for the All-Ireland final once again, and they're not going to settle for anything less. So it is for that reason that I don't expect Laois to have a chance.
Okay, so your closing verdict then, you're going to say that Dublin are going to win the game on Saturday?
Yeah, I would say Dublin are going to win the game on Saturday, and Down are going to win it are going to win the first game. Dublin are going to win the second game. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with you on both of those. I think Dublin, they're just going to be too much for Laois on the weekend. Like you said, they're not going to fear them. They're going to give it their all. I mean, but I think just Dublin had too much in the tank to let it go. And, of course, then Down, as I said earlier. So to round that up, Gary says that Down and Dublin are going to win, and I agree with him. That's all from today on Sideline Sportscast. Tune into our next video where we'll be previewing Sunday's action as Cork take on Kildare and Donegal take on Kerry in another doubleheader at Croke Park in the other quarterfinals. Thank you for listening. We've been your hosts, Kevin Bolger